In this video, we explain the archive utility and its main features. DB-archive is part of the database utilities. Its purpose is to extract production data like statistics and reports and store it in ASCII-based flat files. We do this for a number of reasons, with regulatory compliance being front and center. In many cases, companies do this for legal, audit, and reporting obligations. This being said, DB-archive is only effective if it's carefully configured, or you could be accumulating large amounts of worthless data. Here we explain how to set up the archive utility. We look at the configuration of the utility's archiving criteria. This is needed before the archive utility can be automated using batch modes. For hosts with graphical capabilities, the utility offers a convenient user interface. However, if you don't have these capabilities or you don't want to use the UI, there's a variable which can be modified. We'll consider how to execute the utility in batch mode on the command line, so it can be incorporated in a job and scheduled on a regular basis as part of a maintenance routine. We'll navigate to the archive directory and consider the structure of the files. In order to analyze archive data, Automic Automation offers a browser function, although this is only available on Windows. The archive utility is designed mainly for archiving, but it also has a secondary use called the report mode, which makes it possible to extract structured reports for use with output management solutions. DB-archive extracts operational data and stores it in flat files. Many companies have auditing and compliance obligations, and they use this data to report to the appropriate authorities. These are standard ASCII data files stored on a file system. Archive targets 4 datasets, namely system messages, statistics, which are the execution records, executed task reports, and comments added in process monitoring. In most cases, DB-archive is submitted in batch mode on the command line using the UCYBARBR executable. Note that the utility comes with a simple user interface, which we recommend using for the initial configuration if it's possible. If not, we have the UC_utility_archive client variable. The command has options. -B is used for batch mode, and -S is for the client targeted by the archive since the utility is client-specific. These two options are mandatory. The -V option prints the Automic Automation version, and it's optional. Assuming the executable is in the same directory as the INI file, then -I points to the location of this file, and it's optional as well. If you've changed the location, then you must use the option. Once the data is available, we provide a tool on Windows platforms called the Archive Browser. It makes it possible to dissect large volumes of archive data since these archive files are structured. Data items that have been flagged for archiving can also be removed with the db-unload utility. In that sense, DB-archive provides similar functions to another utility, db-reorg. Finally, there's a secondary use of the archive utility called the report modes. This allows us to extract reports and structured lists for use with output management tools. DB-archive provides a simple user interface. We can use this to fine-tune the archive criteria. Here we indicate how far back we want to go in days in setting the start date of the archiving process for each table. To invoke it, we simply use the executable with the jar extension for Windows or sh for Unix. This will initiate a simple login screen that requires AWI-type credentials. Once past this, we adjust the settings and save them. DB-archive can then be submitted in batch mode, and there won't be a need to return to this UI unless the settings need to be adjusted. If your utility's host does not provide graphical capabilities or you do not want to use the convenient user interface for first use, criteria values can also be set in a variable called UC_utility_archive. The UI has a settings menu to set our criteria. The first tab is the messages table called MELD, which stores how far back we go to start the archive. We have an on-off switch to enable the archiving process, and 2 boxes for read and unread messages. Criteria values are reflected in a client variable called UC_utility_archive, where you can configure and update values directly without the UI. Our recommendation is to keep the archive value in days as low as possible, and 0 is optimal. One common mistake we see is the matching of archive values to reorg values. Longer values for reorg make sense. We want to optimize database performance, but not delete recent data. By contrast, waiting 15 or 20 days to archive makes no sense at all. We recommend archiving everything as soon as the data is there. The next tab is Statistics, which offers the same on-off switch for both the executions and executed task reports. The value will be the same for both. The impacted tables matching those two datasets are AH and RH respectively. Here again, it makes the most sense to keep the value as low as possible. Note that DB-archive will also archive all the comments that operators add to executions in the process monitoring tools. This isn't configurable, it keeps everything. The last tab is for the archive itself. We specify the archive directory and the maximum size of each archive before a new set of files is created. The default is 650 megabytes. When the archive reaches that, it splits off into a new file set. Finally, we can specify the format of the date applied to our archive records. Invariably, we're going to generate multiple archive datasets, a process which appends values to UC_utility_archive. The archive set value shows how many rounds of archives the system has seen. Then we have values showing the runtime of the archive process for each table, the size, and the dates. These values are used as predictors when we execute forecasts. The resulting archive directory contains a number of files, and they all start with UC_. Mail.txt is the flat file that contains the messages, ACMT contains the comments, AH contains the statistics, and RH the reports. Note that AH and RH data files are indexed, and so you'll find an index file for each. When you submit DB-archive in batch mode, the current user must have a matching user object in the administration tools. Failing this, you'll be faced with an access deny message at submission. The user does not require authorizations or privileges. By extension, being familiar with login objects and the way Automic automation authenticates on the agent system, you realize that the user object should also have a matching login object if you're going to incorporate your DB-archive procedure in an executable job object for the purposes of automation. Once you've generated the archive files, they can be explored using the archive browser, a simple executable available on Windows only. We load the directory in the archive folder fields and click the refresh button to load the data. We can use the main filter to display each individual datasets, which displays at the bottom. We also have filter functions. For example, you can enter a client number and click refresh. You'll then see the data specific to that client. Finally, we have a number of very important recommendations that will be conveyed to you by our support and services teams. First, one of the most significant decisions you'll make is the storage location of your archives. Leaving your files in the utility host system is never a good idea. The file system will grow to the point of saturation. We recommend outputting the process to a shared drive, which can be backed up to external storage and accessed by the Windows-based archive browser. Unlike other utilities, the INI file is not an area of concern, as the default values will not get in the way of a successful archiving routine. We're not going to spend a ton of time on this. This being said, there are settings for things like formatting, and it might be worth taking a look at the INI file to make sure you're familiar with the contents. Run the archive every day. It won't hurt, you'll just generate a bunch of flat files that have to be stored. It makes no sense to set archiving to long periods. Archive everything as soon as it's available. There's no downside, and the data will be there if you need it. You should synchronize archiving, reorganizing, and unloading to maximize database maintenance and data retention. A careful crafting of a maintenance routine is by far the most effective methods to retain critical information while optimizing database performance and avoiding major problems.